Hi everyone, and welcome to the Odinic School of Mysteries. My name is Bear. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really glad that you're here. I really appreciate it, actually. One of the things I wanted to do right off the bat is I really wanted to say thank you to all of you who've wrote such nice things and subscribed since my last video. That really meant a lot to me, and I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to get back and respond yet. And I want you to know that I know you're there and that you've written stuff. I just haven't been able to do that. I am right now in Oregon. My wife and I are moving to Maine, but we had to come back and do a number of stuff, and some of the stuff that we've been doing has been taking up a lot of time, such as closing out my father's estate. Well, many of you know that my father passed away, and so there's been a lot of paperwork and stuff that's really taken my attention away from doing this sort of thing, because I have to deal with all of that kind of stuff. If just take my advice. I know it's unsolicited, but just hear me on this if you hear anything. Right, if talking about death of a loved one is not something anyone ever wants to do. No one wants to have the conversation with their dad, their parents, or their siblings, or whatever. But just do your heirs a solid and just write everything down. Take the time to write the will. Take the time to make a whole list of all your bank accounts and all your assets and where they are. It would save your family a lot of heartache. And I know it's not something people want to talk about, but just take my advice and just write shit down. It makes things a whole lot easier. Just trust me. I've been living through this, and it's been really hell. Because you don't really get to grieve because you have to do all the paperwork. And it's like... Anyway, so that's why we're here. This is why I'm down in my mother-in-law's sewing studio. They live upstairs, and this is a kind of a daylight basement. And she has like a long arm quilting machine and other stuff like that. That's pretty fancy pantsy when it comes to sewing. But I just want to say that there's reasons why I haven't recorded anything. It's not because I'm just slacking off. Not that you would need to know that anyway. But so to get on to actual business, many of you know I'm a part of a Norse mystery school, and I say that, and people, I think, have the misunderstanding that it's like some huge organization like the the Masons. It's some huge organization like the Masons, right, with thousands and thousands of members. And that I don't, when I say I'm part of a mystery school, I don't want you to have that in your mind, because that is actually, as far as true mystery schools go, I'm going to just lower this down a little bit. There we go. Because as far as true mystery schools go, that actually isn't super accurate. Most mystery schools, worth their salt, are not huge, massive organizations with thousands of members and thousands of millions of dollars in assets and properties around the world. Most aren't that way. I was taught by a single teacher, and I do not know if there are others out there like me. It's not like that we're in like communication with each other and we all know of each other's locations or whatever. It's not like that. So far as I know, and I mean this and this is quite a literal statement. So far as I know, I'm the only one left. Me and my teacher. And I could be, and I'm saying that because I literally don't know if I'm the only one left or not. I'm sure there are other Norse schools around, but it's a very dying lineage. It's something that is um, disappearing from the face of the earth, and there isn't many like us left anymore. The Even with the big mystery schools, if you could even call them that anymore, they're mostly mystery schools in name only, such as the Masons, are more or less just boys' clubs anymore. It's a social network with cool symbols rather than an actual esoteric group of like-minded individuals. There's very, very few esoteric Freemasons left. And I've heard from a number of Masons who've made it all the way up to the top how disappointed they were because they didn't really feel like they've done anything. There wasn't any special secret that was shared. It was just kind of, it felt like a waste of time and money. And so it's really frustrating because I don't, as much as I would like to, it's not even really like I could even prove what I'm saying because there's so much, because there's not really anything to really verify other than, I hate to say it this way, but you kind of just got to take my word for it. There's really no other way to say it, you know. So my advice is this as we go forward. Listen to what I say. You know, it's perfectly acceptable to entertain an idea without accepting it, right? There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, it's probably a good thing to be able to entertain ideas without accepting ideas. Entertain what I'm saying without accepting it. If what I say bears itself out, if it doesn't seem like I'm just making shit up, I'm speaking out of my ass, if what I'm saying holds up, then you know that I'm telling the truth as best as I understand it. Because I don't know the whole truth, right? But if what I'm saying sounds like bullshit, sounds like I'm making it up, doesn't sound true, and what the information I say doesn't bear itself out, well, then you know I'm a fool. And you can wash your hands of me and walk away knowing that you've avoided falling trap to some bullshit on the internet. I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I know this information. I've lived this information. I've taught students, and the school is growing. You know, people are waking up and coming home to their indigenous faiths. And there are a few among those people who are coming home to those faiths who realize that there's more to it than just close your eyes and just believe that Odin exists. And one of the problems that we've had, and I'm going to get into what I want to talk about here in a second, but this is just kind of my last point before we get into it. One of the problems that we've had in the Norse community, if you've been a part of any Norse community, like on Facebook, for example, in their mad dash to flee Christianity, and a lot of people come to this because they don't like Christianity, and I worry sometimes that they come to this not because they actually love the gods, but because they just don't want to be Christian. And this seems like a better club. But with that said, you go to these groups on like Facebook or so, and they're in such a mad rush to leave Christianity that they fall victim to all the same traps that befell the Christians. And you would say, Bear, what do you mean? What do you mean when they've fallen these traps? Well, what I mean is this. It's becoming a slave to dogma. You will say something. I've experienced this a number of times. I've since left Facebook, but I've experienced this a lot when you say, look, I think this is something here. There's this world tree business. There's something it's telling us here. And they would say, well, they called it an unverified personal gnosis. How dare you? I'm serious. This is actually what they would say. Like, don't share that kind of stuff because you're pressing your beliefs on other people. Right. All that exists, all that should exist, is the literal word for word, listicle that exists in the Norse poetry. And if you deviate in any way from the literal reading of that, well, then you're just pressing your beliefs on other people, and how dare you? And so my teacher told me, and this is something that has stuck with me from the very beginning, that the myths, the Norse myths, are a trap for fools and a light to the wise. And I want to say that again because I think that it is worthy of saying again. The myths of the Norse are people, the heathens, those who are indigenous Europeans. People are going to misinterpret that as me saying that black people aren't allowed or something like that. I think that's stupid. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying with the people who come from this area, and this is their indigenous religion. The myths are purposely built to be a trap for fools and a light to the wise. The foolish person is the person who looks at what's being written and says, this is a literal reading. I'm going to read this in a very literal way. The wise man is the man who looks at the myths and says, there is something here that is being told to me that is not plainly written, but is being expressed all the same. Does that make sense? There's a thing in mystery school philosophy known as a blind. And now we're getting to the thing I really wanted to talk about. A blind is something that happens in Norse philosophy. Mystery school philosophy. It's a method of keeping secrets. And a blind is used in many different ways, but you would say that the most common usage of a blind is where you put an over amount of emphasis on wrong or misleading information to encourage someone quite effectively to come to a wrong conclusion. I'm going to say that again because it's worthy of repeating. A blind in mystery school philosophy is a secret-keeping mechanism. And the way it works is that you put an over amount of emphasis on certain misleading or false information to encourage someone to come to a wrong conclusion. It's a bit like if someone's searching your house for gold, right? You don't want to lead them to where the gold actually is. Say it's buried under the bed, for example. You start doing things to make the barn look like that's where the gold is hidden. you know, I don't know what you would do. You would like try and stand between them and the barn, and you would, you know, get really nervous when they walk near the barn, and you'll try and encourage them to walk away from the barn, and you just get really uptight when they walk near the barn. And so, you know, the thieves are going, oh my gosh, it's probably in the barn. We should go look in the barn. Why is he acting so weird about the barn? And so they wander off to go look in the barn, and the gold under the bed is completely safe. Same sort of thing. Another example of this is you could have a giant bag of sugar. Big old 50-pound bag of sugar that's sitting right here. And you could label on that bag of sugar 100% fat-free. It's diet sugar. It's 100% fat-free. And is there any lie on that statement? There is no lie in that statement. That statement, that bag of sugar is 100% fat-free, is 100% true. Right? It's 100% true. But it is unbelievably misleading. It's unbelievably misleading. And so, this is the way a blind works. This, you know, they use this in advertising. They use this in marketing all the time. Right? They use it. You want to see a blind work, just look at politics. You know, find your government's politics and look at what they do. You'll see blinds used constantly. It's a bit of a game, really. How do you say true things while at the same time selling lies? And so the person who cannot think gets manipulated, and who doesn't research for themselves will get misled, and people go astray. And it happens all the time, and no one ever notices because people believe the blinds. In mystery school philosophy, and I'm going to say specifically, we're going to talk specifically about the Norse mysteries now. In the Norse mystery schools, some of the most important symbols are not the most famous. In fact, one of the most important, highest held, and most honored symbols in the mystery schools is not something that people particularly think about really at all. It's more of a feature of the person's character, really, more than it is really something worth paying attention to. And that, of course, is, if you've read or paid attention to any of my previous work, is the spear of Gungnir, Odin's spear. And you'll remember that it is this spear that scholars believe pierces his side when he hangs on the world tree, when he goes through his death and rebirth ordeal and becomes wise for the first time. Why is this important? Because there's this thing called keys, and there's this thing called doors. There's two different types of ways of keeping secrets. And if you want to know what's behind the door, you have to possess the key. Now, each thing, the door and its key, appear to be very separate things. They don't appear to be really of any super profound consequence. But they are. You require one to unlock the other. So in the Norse mysteries, we say that it's called the mystery of the hanged man. Most people know it as the story of Odin hanging from Yggdrasil, the world tree. That is said to hold the profundity of the universe. The entire mystery of man is tied up in symbols in that story. And it's only like, what is it? I feel like it's 10 lines long, if that. If I remember right, without looking, I think in the Havamal they're in five line stanzas, and I think there's 2. I could be wrong, but I feel like you could correct me. But I feel like it's just 10 lines, like 2 stanzas, and that's it. You know, where Odin hangs. But that is a door, and the door has its own mythology, has its own symbols, it has all its own philosophy all unto itself. But the key to unlock that door can only be achieved by, well, understanding the key. And the key itself has its own mysteries, its own symbols, its own philosophy behind it. So it's actually quite an ingenious way of keeping secrets, because you could find somebody out there who might figure out one but not the other, because they don't appear to be related. Gungnir appears in the story, but it doesn't appear to be really anything much more than a storytelling device. It doesn't appear to be anything major. And so you could have, because they seem so different, and they don't seem to be related, it's not really going to occur to anyone to investigate one symbol in conjunction with the other symbol. And if one person manages to solve one of them, the secret is still kept. You don't really get to know the totality of the mystery. You might get a piece of it, but you don't get to know the totality of the mystery, because half of it, if not most of it, is locked behind, is tied up in the door itself. If we're talking about, let's say you solve the mystery of the Spear of Gungnir, most of the mystery is tied up in both the Hanged Man symbol, which is its door, and when you combine those two like an alchemical admixture, it, like a looking glass, suddenly it opens up the mystery that's behind all of that. And I'm not going to be able to go into a lot of it today. And I think, see, I've already been talking for about 30 minutes, 23 minutes. But we could give it a start. And I think that it's worth just to kind of point out how it works. So, pointy objects are almost always mind symbols. And you have probably, if you've been with me long enough, you've heard me talk about this before. Pointy objects are very often and almost always symbols for the mind. If not the mind, it's also a symbol for the combination, we'll say, of the body, the mind, and the spirit. Two things are true at the same time. Occult symbols often do this, where you have where the hang on, I wanted to make sure this wasn't my wife texting me. Let me see. Was it my wife? Nope. Okay. She's asleep in the other room. I wanted to make sure I didn't wake her up. what was I saying? Okay. Occult symbols very often do this, where there's multiple meanings. And one of the things that we do when we first have someone who wants to join the mystery school, something I had to do, something that my students have to do, is that you have about 9 months to a year of doing what kind of seems like boring, meaningless work. And, you do a lot of coloring, you do some meditation, you do long walks, you do, a lot of self-work, and, you do math, you do different stuff. And what you're doing is you're kind of flexing both sides of your brain muscle. And like you're working out, right? You have to, you start lifting those muscles because we're so used to being taught what to think, and we've never been allowed to actually think for ourselves. And so we work really hard on developing that mind muscle. And one of the primary reasons for that is that you have to be able to hold multiple ideas in your head at the same time, which most people think they can do, but most people can't, not to any varying degree. Because there's a lot of things that are true at the same time that appear to be opposites of each other. And you have to be able to balance that and hold those ideas together. So you have a lot of symbols that mean many different things at the same time. And it kind of just depends on, one, how the symbol is used, and two, things are true on multiple planes. So you could have a mind symbol, and you could have a symbol for the unification of the body-mind spirit complex, and you could have all these things together, all stacked on top of each other. And it's really hard for people to kind of wrap their minds around that. But going back to what I was saying, pointy objects, swords, arrows, spears, even a candle, like a flame, because it has kind of that point, are almost always used as both illumination symbols and mind symbols. So you have this. So one of the most ancient and the most simplistic versions of this is called the blade, which is just an equilateral triangle. And so you have 2 points on the bottom and you have 1 point on the top. Or you can even draw it upside down and have 2 points on the top and 1 point on the bottom. And that's called the chalice. I'm going to zoom through this really quickly without a ton of deep explanation, because we got a lot of stuff to get through and I don't want to wake my family up. So let me get my thoughts in order. 1 sec. So you have you have our equilateral triangle. It's a mind symbol. You say, Bear, why is this a mind symbol? Well, you have 2 parts of your mind. You have a masculine mind and you have a feminine mind. And the masculine mind, if you've been with me for a while, you've heard me say this a number of times. The masculine mind which is the left brain and the right side of the body. So it makes kind of a cross. So this side of the brain focuses on the right side of the body. This side of the brain focuses on the left side of the body. And the masculine part of the mind, which is called the sacred masculine or the sacred father, in the Norse mysteries you'd call it the Odin mind, the mind of Odin. And one of these things that it represents is, so Odin is the wisdom god. So its primary, you would say, like its primary its primary function is wisdom. But the things that kind of fall under that are things that you would say that are quantifiable on a piece of paper, we'll say. So mathematics, logic, science, engineering, linear time, things of that nature. The masculine, the sacred masculine, if we're talking about electronics, like electricity, is also what you'd call the anode, or the positive electrical polarity. It's like if you looked at a battery, it's the thing that has the plus sign on it, right? The sacred feminine then it occupies just the opposite. So she, like you could say that her primary attribute is truth. And you say, well, that's really weird. Why is that truth? Well, because truth isn't quantifiable. You can't just crunch the numbers. So she represents things that are not that she represents knowledge that is not quantifiable on a piece of paper. The feeling you get from a mother's hug, love, eternity, safety, right? The sacred masculine is energy that's pushed out. Like you think of sex, right? It's energy ejaculated out. Men go to, the masculine part of the universe is the part that goes to war. It's the part that goes hunting. It's the part that goes into the wild. It's the part that goes into the fields. It's the thing that goes out. The sacred feminine is the cathode, or the negative polarity in a you would say like in the an electrical circuit with the minus sign battery. And women get upset when you say the negative. Well, it's because that term has been really misused. Negative doesn't mean bad. It just means that energy is being brought into itself, right? If you're creating a circuit, the negative sign is the sign that has the energy going inside, comes back up into the battery to create the circuit. And so she is the thing that's like the call home, right? She's the thing that makes a home, that is doing things that concern the household, and where the men go out, the women call people home to come and be safe. Big mother's hug, a big breasty hug. Like if you ever had like a mother and you just like bury your head in her chest and you feel so safe and so comforted by that. That's what that sacred feminine represents. Things that are not quantifiable on a piece of paper. By themselves, it's a very poor way of living in the world. If you only have one of those things and are very depressed in the other. If you're too creative, you just vomit creation everywhere and everything you do sucks. Because you don't have that logic side saying, no, 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 maybe you shouldn't put cheese in your coffee. It's going to taste bad, right? There's that logic side that crunches the numbers and says, no, 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 you can't do that. If you want good coffee, this is how you do it. There's a checks and a balance there that's going back and forth. But if you have too much sacred masculine in your life, well then you're too logical. You can't see outside of the box. You cannot create anything new. The only thing the sacred masculine can do is it can only operate under the things it already knows. It's a calculator, is all it is. But the sacred feminine is the part that gives birth to new things. She's the one that comes up with all the good ideas. Well, she's the one that comes up with all the ideas. So you have to have that marriage. They have to have sex with each other in your mind in order to have good children. And the child of that the sacred masculine and that sacred feminine, is the thing that's birthed into the universe, into physical reality. Everything you see could touch in your environment was a product of somebody's mind. At some point, somebody had the idea, someone drew it out, and someone made it happen. Right? They had their sacred masculine, their sacred feminine, were having sex with each other, and then the physical object that's birthed into reality is called the beloved son. It's called the beloved son. This is Balder. You follow me? This is Balder. Frigg and Odin. The sacred feminine is Frigg. The sacred masculine is Odin. And the beloved sun, the bright and shining star of their lives, is the thing that was birthed into creation, which is Balder, who dies when he comes into the underworld, which is carnality, which is the physical world, which is important to understand. All right, this is one of the first and most primary mysteries of all mystery school philosophy, not just the Norse. All mystery school philosophy. This is the dirty little secret that no one ever wants to tell you, is that this is the underworld. We have made a grave assumption that the world we see around us is the world of the living. We have assumed that because we're conscious. We look at ourselves and we say, look at me, I'm a conscious being, therefore I'm alive. But you're not. It's an assumption that you've made. Your spirit is alive, but your spirit has been interred. It's been buried in matter. It's the God that's hung from a tree and is dangled into the underworld. You dangle from the heavens by a thread in the underworld, and you suffer in the underworld. Right? You've taken something that is mental, spiritual matter, and you've turned it into physical matter. You've transmuted it. And this is the dirty little secret. So, you say, Bear, how does the Spear of Gungnir unlock the Hangman? Well, we have just kind of started to walk into that, didn't we? A balanced mind unlocks the universe because it allows you to think and to ask good questions and to not just believe what you were told. When you were born, when you came into this reality that you know and call life, you call it life, but what you call things and what they are is not the same thing. When you came here, you were given a religion, you were given a nationality, you were given a race, you were given a political affiliation, and you were just expected to follow the rules. Everyone looks around, everyone says, this is who you are. This is who you are now. And then you go about your life and you look about yourself and you don't feel like you're home and you feel like you're in a place that doesn't belong to you. No one around you understands you. You don't get the customs and the people here. Everyone's walking around asleep and you feel weird. People look at you weird and you look at them weird. Right? You're in a place and a people that are not your own. This is why I said at the beginning, when people are going to get all pissy at me because I said the words that people are all going to think are racist, which is why I said, the Northern European religion. This is why I said that it's not about race, because that's a dumb idea. Has nothing to do with race. It has to do with where you are. You're in a world of dead and dying people. They go about their lives asking no questions. They believe exactly what they're told. They believe what they were told is the truth. There was a line, and I loved it. I took a screenshot of it by he's a comedian, J.P. Sears, and he did a community post. This is a while ago now, but he said this thing, and I thought it was just brilliant. He says that, see if I can remember it. He says, I believe that what I'm told is what I think. I believe that what I'm told is what I think. Think about that for a minute. Think about that. I believe that what I'm told is what I think. And you are the one who is called crazy and weird for asking basic questions of things. And you're the one who everyone rolls their eyes at. And I know for me, I am only 33. I'm not that old. Which is why people, sometimes they want to put me on a pedestal. And I'm like, dude, I'm only 33. I'm not a master of anything. Oops. But I have never lived in a place where that felt like home. I've always been perpetually homesick for a place that I can't remember and miss the people that I've never met. And there's a lot of people who feel that way. And well, there's a kind of a simple explanation for it. You're not in Kansas anymore. What you've been told is a lie. But it's the balanced mind that gets you out of that. It's where you wake up spiritually, you wake up mentally, and you start saying, you know what? There is something going on here that I can't explain. And you have to be willing. This is the thing, you guys and gals, and this is the thing that no one can do. And you have to be able to do this, right? You have to say, I bear, excuse me, I apologize for burping on the camera. I am capable of being duped. I'm capable of falling for mind control. I'm capable of believing lies. I'm capable of that. I'm not as smart as I think that I am. In fact, I am a fool. I'm a fool, and I don't want to be foolish anymore. I want to ask good questions and not fall into assumptions. An assumption made is a person who's asleep. But again, that balanced mind. In symbology, you have your equilateral triangle, boop, like this. You can freak people out and do the whole, looking through the triangle thing. That's always fun. Anyway, you have the equilateral triangle. The thing that occupies the space above the symbol is called the heavens. It's it's what you would call like the highest ideal. It's the thing that you want that the person who's drawing the symbol believes is the highest ideal possible. That's the thing that we're trying to get to. Everyone's trying to get into the heavens. Right? The thing that's on the bottom, the space that occupies the bottom, is the earth. And it's the lowest. It's carnality. It's the place where, because you think of earth, light can't escape earth. It's too dense. The atoms move too slow. And so it's the lowest possible vibration, it's the lowest possible ideal. It's the thing that it doesn't mean that it's like zero, right? But of all the governing principles, you'd say this is the lowest rank. It's the lowest rank of all the governing principles. So if you have so we hold our spear out in front of us. You have your spearhead sitting on top of your spear, and it's pointing up. You have the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. I'm trying to do this. I don't remember if my camera flips it when I'm recording it or not. So, but the right side, you would say, would be the sacred masculine, your sword arm, the energy that goes out, right? The sacred masculine. Your shield arm, which would be your left side, is the sacred feminine, right? And those are sitting on the ground, like this, the bottom of the frame. And the beloved son, Balder, the good child, is the one that sits on top. And why is this important? Because you would think, well, maybe Odin is the top of the pantheon. Maybe he needs to be on top or something like that. No, that's not true. They're the parents of the divine child. They're your parents. Now, the idiot out there is going to say, well, you're saying that we're literally the child of Odin. And it's like, come on. Use your brains. All right, use your brains. We're talking about allegory here. We're using story to help us get to some place we wouldn't normally be able to get to. Let's see, I'm at 46 minutes. Use your brains, people. That's what they're there for. All right. The beloved son is on top. Right. It's the thing that was born out of divine marriage. It's the shining tip of the spear. It's unity consciousness. It's unity consciousness. This up here, where's my camera? Right there. See that? Unity consciousness. Down here, you have a father and a mother. And if they're not working together, you don't have unity consciousness. They're fighting with each other for dominance. You're unbalanced. So, if you are balanced, this is called the balanced pyramid. You're sitting down here on the earth, boop, the earth being the bottom, right, the bottom of the symbol. It sits on the earth. And if you have unity consciousness, you can't be pushed over. You're in balance. You have a good foundation. People could push on you on either side, and because you have good footings, you have a good foundation, a strong mother and a strong father who are working together, you cannot be moved. People will push you and you can't go anywhere. But if duality, right, is raised to the top, if duality is raised to the highest possible place, this is where we get the idea of the Baphomet. People see the Baphomet with the horns. This is where this comes from. Duality raised to heaven. And unity, the shining tip of the spear, wisdom itself, is buried incarnation. Like I'm sticking my fingers down here below the frame so you could see it disappearing. This is Odin being pierced by his own spear. Right? His shining light is no longer visible. He's dying and he's suffering. And now, any asshole who comes over, because you're in the unbalanced pyramid, they could just push you over one way or the other way. They could just tell you something and you just fall right into belief, right? You just fall right into logic. You just fall right on it into belief. You go anywhere you're told. You go anywhere you're pushed. But here's the thing, is that the shining tip here it's like a flame. It's hot. And it's the refining through fire. And refinement, it sucks for the material that's being refined. It's very painful. being burned is extremely painful. But the principle behind fire is that with all other types of matter, like if you move like a solid into a liquid, into a gas, for example, like if we're dealing with water, slow the atoms down, you get ice, which is a solid. Speed them up, you have a liquid. Speed up any faster, you have steam or gas, right? Where they kind of turn into nothing. They just float around in the atmosphere. They've escaped into the heavens. Those are all physical changes. You know, you haven't really changed anything in the actual molecular structure of it. You've just changed the way the atoms are, how quickly the atoms are moving. But fire fundamentally changes it on a molecular level so that it is no longer, once something is burned, it is no longer what it once was, and it cannot be put back together again. The log, you burn a log in the fireplace. Many people have done this. Right? You put the log in the fireplace, that log turns, and you light it on fire. That log turns into carbon and heat and light. Log is no more. All that energy has been transformed into carbon, heat, and light. All the base material just gets sloughed off into ash, and the higher material, the part that is worthy of ascension, ascends and becomes something that it was not before and could not possibly get without being lit on fire. So that shining tip of Odin's spear, when it's thrust inside him, is that painful refinement of the admixture of the god that is being all the bad shit that makes us suffer gets burnt off, and then it falls down until the god finally is a pure being, and that the things that were making him suffer in the underworld is released. His spear comes out, the cord that binds him into the heavens is broken, and he falls into the waters of Erd, which is where the Norns live at the base of the world tree, which is the birth canal of new life. Death and life are the same thing. They're exactly the same thing. The only difference between death and being born is which side of the canal you're standing on. You die here, you're born there. You die there, you're born here. And there's a bunch of symbolism we could go into that we don't have time for about that. And this is why it's a mystery school. There's a lot of freaking shit to go through. But like you talk about, like Odin is on the tree for 9 days, for example, right? You're in your mother's womb for 9 months. You're hung by an umbilical cord for 9 months until you are released from that cord, and you fall into the well of wisdom, and you're squirted out into a new life and into a new world. Joe Rogan once called a woman's vagina a portal to a different dimension, and he was absolutely right on that. But you could also say that trees have always been, in almost all mystery school traditions that I'm aware of, trees have always represented mankind, but specifically being in matter, right? Being born into a body was called the tree, which is why in the Norse, you'll recall in the Norse creation story, Ask and Embla, the first man and the first woman, were trees. They were made to come to life. The DNA strands, right, were made to come to life. You could also say that man hangs from the world tree because his mind is being dangled off of his skeletal system. And so he's dangled in matter that way. There's a lot of parallel symbols that are all kind of stacked on top of each other. And in my experience, that when this happens, when you find that patterns are present in multiple multiple planes of existence at the same time, you're probably dealing with a truth and not just bullshit. Right? If it only exists in one plane and doesn't exist nowhere else, well, then it's probably a falsehood. Like, people say money is truth. Well, money is real power. Well, you don't really see the gods using money, do you? It's a human invention. It's a control invention. It's a blind. Quoting my teacher again, because I have a huge amount of respect, obviously, for this man. He says, quite wisely so, I believe, that all real power is something nobody can take away from you. Real power is something nobody can take away from you. So it's not money. It's not just brute physical strength. It's none of that shit. That's all underworld bullshit. It's all stuff where people who think they're asleep, who think they're awake, believe is true power. It's not. So, I know I went through that really fast. I know I was talking really fast, but I wanted to give you an example of the way these kinds of mechanisms work, so you could kind of keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. Because the important symbols are not the obvious ones. They're not the obvious ones. You know, and it happens that way a lot. Quick recap. I think I got what? I'm almost to an hour. You have a key and you have a door. The key unlocks the door. The key has its own symbols, has all its own philosophy, has all its own, it's its own island all into itself. That if you mastered this key, you would be all the better for it. Same thing with the door. The door has all its own symbols, has all its own philosophy, has its own story, but the two things do not seem on the surface like they're related to each other at all. And if they are related to each other, it doesn't seem like it's a very huge, deal. Like the Spear of Gungnir, if you follow Odin's story, it's just something he has around. He doesn't really even use it. There's instances where they, with swearing on a spear and throwing it over a battlefield and that kind of thing. But you don't really, like in the myths, you don't really see him other than the story of Ragnarok. He's not really, he just kind of holds it. And, this is something else, too, I think is really funny, is that if you understand this principle of the spear up, spear down thing, and so they say, you throw the spear over this battlefield and like, oh, you're all sacrificed to Odin. And people think, oh, yeah, that's awesome. Oh. But really, if you understand that symbol, it's kind of an insult. It's not meant to be a compliment. Right. It's kind of saying, that spear gets thrown and lands in the dirt, and it's saying, look, you guys are all, due to your own ignorance, you suffer and die. That's really what it's saying. You're just, and if Odin chooses you, you're just cannon fodder. You just get to go and die in Valhalla or in Ragnarok. Many people disagree with me on that, and that's fine. I don't need you to agree with me. It's my own thought. But it doesn't, understanding this principle, it doesn't really strike me as really a compliment. What was his name? This is my last point, and it's not Descartes. Thucydides? I feel like it was Thucydides. I think it was Thucydides, who said that if you separate your warriors from your philosophers, you'll have your rulers will be cowards and your fighters will be idiots. I can't do I don't remember the word for word of it, but it's basically that. If you separate your warriors from your philosophers, well, then you'll have your thinking done by fools and your fighting done, or your thinking done, you'll have your thinking done by cowards and your fighting done by fools. And what do you expect has happened to our people? Again, because this is fucking YouTube and I feel like I need to say it. When I say our people, I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about the heart of a heathen, of a conscious, awake person. I'm talking about a conscious, awake person, a child of the gods. And it's really frustrating that we live in such a stupid time that I have to very slowly, like I'm speaking to a child, say, no, I am saying this. So, I hope that made some sense. I hope it did. I really do. And I'm really sorry if it didn't. But this kind of information isn't meant for everybody. Unfortunately, most people aren't really going to get it. A lot of people are not conscious enough. They don't have a mind enough to be able to do some free thought. They have to be told they have to be taught the truth in a very literal form. There is a literal Odin who has a literal 8-legged horse, who has a literal spear with 2 literal ravens, 2 literal wolves, and he was literally born out of a literal giant, and but some people, they have to have that. But like I said at the beginning, what my teacher told me, and I really took to heart, his quote, and I quote, "The myths of the heathens are a trap for fools and a light to the wise." End quote. And I know I will repeat myself a lot when I want to make a point, but I want to say it again. And I want you to hear me, if it's possible for you to hear me. His quote is this, and I quote, "The heathen myths are a trap for fools, but a light to the wise. End quote. As the old saying goes, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. You don't have dualistic thinking. You have unity consciousness. You have one eye. One eye. You have one consciousness. You have one sight. You don't have two sights. You have one. One. In the land of the blind. In the land of the people who don't see, who don't think, and whose spirits have not been awakened. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Hail the All-Father, and hail to you, my friends and companions. Sail well, my friends, across the stormy seas. Eyes to the skies. The gods are coming back. I hope you're ready. This has been the Odinic School of Mysteries. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.